It's now my great privilege and pleasure to introduce Dr. Viet Thanh Nguyen. Our commencement ceremony is enriched by his presence with us here today. Dr. Nguyen, will you please approach the podium so we may honor you as an extraordinary author and professor. In 1975, at the age of 4, you fled war-torn Vietnam with your family and arrived as refugees in the United States. After living for some time in a refugee camp in Pennsylvania, your family eventually made its way to San Jose, and your parents established one of the first Vietnamese grocery stores in the city. In your adoptive country, you and your family encountered discrimination and racism. You struggled, and you thrived. After graduating from Bellarmine College Preparatory, a Jesuit high school in San Jose, you earned a bachelor's and later a doctoral degree from the University of California at Berkeley. You joined the faculty at the University of Southern California, and today you serve as the Errol Arnold Chair of English and Professor of English, American Studies and Ethnicity, and Comparative Literature. Among other recognitions for teaching and scholarship, you've received the Mellon Mentoring Award for faculty mentoring graduate students and the Albert R. Robenheimer Distinguished Junior Faculty Award for outstanding research, teaching, and service. You're an accomplished author. Your debut novel, The Sympathizer, which explores themes of caste, education, war, identity, and loyalty, earned, among other accolades, the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. Many more highly acclaimed and impactful books have followed. Your life experience and extraordinary gifts as a writer allow you to tell, as few can, the story of refugees and immigrants, as well as the continuing toll taken by war. In 2017, you were selected as a MacArthur Foundation Fellow. You serve on the board for the Pulitzer Prizes and for the International Rescue Committee, and you are actively involved in promoting arts and Vietnamese culture and the study of how cultures, peoples, capital, and ideas flow between Asia, the Americas, and the Pacific Islands. Dr. Viet Thanh Nguyen, you personify the very best of Jesuit education. Seattle University is proud to confer on you today the degree of Doctor of Letters, honoris causa. Will the chair of Seattle University's Board of Directors, Pat Callens, please assist me?
For the photo. Pat. Thank you so much, President Peña-Ver. Good afternoon, Seattle University. Yeah. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of this momentous day. Congratulations, graduates, on your wonderful accomplishment. Congratulations, parents, partners, and loved ones, on your own accomplishment in supporting and encouraging your loved ones, perhaps for longer than you might have expected. I remember how excited my parents were when I told them that I was going to become a doctor. They were hardworking refugees who ran a grocery store. Mom and Dad were quite excited about my becoming a doctor until I told them I was going to become an English doctor. That look of disappointment in their faces is something I'm quite used to. I'm a writer, and I live in Los Angeles. When I tell people in LA that I'm a writer, no one cares. And when I was an undergraduate, an English major, people would sometimes ask, what are you going to do with an English major? Part of me wishes I'd had the bravado to say, win a Pulitzer Prize. Woo! More modestly and more importantly, I should have said, find my voice. That's what I'm talking to you about today. No matter what career you've chosen and whether people care or don't care about it, you'll need to find your voice which is not the same as finishing your degree. My journey to finding my voice started when my family arrived in the United States in 1975, fleeing the end of the war in Vietnam. Being a refugee was traumatic, but it wasn't all bad. Being a refugee left me with the requisite emotional damage necessary to become a writer. Being a refugee also leaves me with an opinion not all of you may agree with, which is that I think refugees and immigrants make America great. Partly how we've done that is by finding our voices and contributing to the chorus or the cacophony that is these United States. My family settled initially in Pennsylvania. In 1751, Pennsylvania's most famous resident, Benjamin Franklin, asked, "Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion?" The aliens he was talking about? Those terrible, dark-skinned Germans. Could Ben Franklin have imagined that one day we would have 3 American presidents of German descent? Dwight Eisenhower, Herbert Hoover, and Donald Trump. Or could Ben Franklin have imagined someone like my older brother? He was 10 years old when he came to Pennsylvania, speaking no English. 7 years later, he graduated as his high school's valedictorian and went to Harvard. I'll convey your applause to him. Just to make my life harder, because I went to my last choice college, he went to Stanford Medical School and became the doctor my parents wanted, which is apparently what you're supposed to do when you're Asian. I'm very proud of my brother, but I don't think we should welcome refugees and immigrants based on whether they can become doctors, presidents, or Pulitzer Prize winners. You shouldn't have to be exceptional to be let into this country. I, for one, believe in an America that is equal for all, where refugees and immigrants have the right to be mediocre, just like every other American. Now, I know you've just spent many years of your life trying not to be mediocre. I'm here to give you permission to fail. Your loved ones might not want to hear that, but you should listen to Samuel Beckett. "Ever tried," he wrote. "Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail again. Fail better." In a sense, none of you have failed. Enjoy your hard-earned degrees. But you hopefully have a long road ahead of you, and you might yet encounter failure, either thrust on you or chosen by you. In my case, even after I got my PhD, became a professor, published my first academic book, I felt like a failure. I thought I had found my voice. It was a funny voice, though. My best friend from high school told me he kept my scholarly book by his bedside. I was so proud, until he told me that he read it every night to help him fall asleep. What I realized was that this voice I had attained after a decade in the academy was not mine. It was the voice of the scholars whose work I read and admired, the kind of voice that the academy rewarded and which I was imitating. I realized if I wanted to write scholarship that might keep non-academic readers awake, and if I wanted to write fiction, I would have to find my own voice. I would have to unlearn the academic voice that had taken me a decade of struggle to learn. That required another decade of more struggle and learning, more trying and failing. And thankfully, I'd had a lot of experience in failing. My first creative writing workshop as an undergraduate was with the writer Maxine Hong Kingston. Every day, I would enter her seminar of 14 students, sit a few feet away from her, a writer whose book, The Woman Warrior, was reputed to be the most widely taught book on college campuses, and every day I would fall asleep. Maxine gave me a B+, which may not seem that bad, except that a B+ is an Asian F. Over the next 20 years, long after I finished my doctorate, I failed again and again and again. If you're someone who's never failed at anything, who's never fallen asleep in class, who's always been good at what you do, I hate you. And we all do. For the rest of us who have failed, the lesson is persistence is more important than talent. One reason I persisted in trying to find my voice was because I knew what it feels like to be silenced. I grew up in an America that was fighting its war in Vietnam all over again, this time on screen. I watched almost all of Hollywood's Vietnam War movies, an exercise I recommend to no one, especially if you're Vietnamese. Vietnam was our country and this was our war, and yet our only place in American movies was to be killed, raped, threatened, or rescued. Our role was to scream, cry, beg, or curse, and if we could say anything at all, it was thank you for being saved. Like many other so-called minorities, we were distorted by stereotypes or erased by ignorance. The solution for many of our parents was to make their children doctors, lawyers, engineers, professors, and all of the many occupations that you're going into, all respectable and necessary occupations. But as Maxine on Kingston has written, we need more than necessity. We also need extravagance. We need storytellers too, if we're going to change the cacophony or the chorus that is our country. As I tried to become a storyteller, I was still concerned about pleasing people, just as I did when I was a grad student. Writing my first book of fiction, The Refugees, I was nervous about whether editors and readers would like the book. And what about my parents? And what about Vietnamese people? My voice was in that book, but it was somewhat muted out of fear. With my next book, The Sympathizer, a novel about the war in Vietnam where the Vietnamese are at the center, and which HBO is turning into a major television series next year. Woo! Yeah. Which means that if you haven't read The Sympathizer, you never have to read The Sympathizer. You can just watch it on TV. I was done worrying in writing that book about whether or not people liked what I had to say. I wrote first and foremost for me. And by not caring about what other people thought, I found my authentic voice. But I ran into a problem. The first major review of the novel said that Viet is the voice for the voiceless. And I thought, no. Have you ever met any Vietnamese people? Eaten at a Vietnamese restaurant? Been inside a Vietnamese home? We're really, really loud. As Arundhati Roy puts it, there's really no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. The ironic thing for some of us who have earned our master's and doctoral degrees is that we may still struggle against being silenced in our professions and our disciplines. Your degrees are only the beginning of being heard, not the guarantee. What I want for each of you is to reach that moment of absolute authenticity when you discover what you truly believe in, when you find your voice, which will give you the will to assert your truth and your presence. But what I also hope is that when you use your voice, that you do not try to be a voice for the voiceless, to be a gatekeeper, to be an owner of your particular domain. Instead, your challenge and mine is to open those gates, keep them open, listen for unheard voices, and abolish the conditions of voicelessness. This is how we change our individual stories, as well as the collective stories of our professions and our disciplines, or even the story of our country, expanding it to exclude no one and include everyone. Class of 2023, it's all over. and yet it's all just beginning. I hope you continue to learn and to be brave enough to fail, and I hope we hear your voices in the future, as we are sure to hear your voices right now. Congratulations.